Okay, this will just be a quick video to announce the forthcoming release of my Coucy Castle sourcebook. It's a 64-page PDF. It's got more than 40 illustrations and keyed maps. The first section is a few chapters worth of historical accounts of the family that came to be known as the Lords of Coucy, and also the history of the building and the town in which the castle was built. And then the second section will be a number of architectural details and keyed maps regarding the castle and some of the primary fortifications of the town. These were written by Eugène-Emmanuel Viollet-le-Duc when he did the restoration of Coucy Castle in 1875. And just all of this is pretty much from the public domain, although I had to translate the Viollet-le-Duc articles from the original French. And so the PDF itself will be pay what you want, but the suggested retail price on it is $2. Coucy Castle was first built around AD 1225 to 1230 over a remarkably short period of time by Enguerrand III. He was otherwise known as the Lord of Coucy, and this estate had been in his family's name for several generations by the point of his building this castle. The castle was then acquired around AD 1400 by the Duke of Orleans, and he was less interested in it as a defensive position, so he did some modifications like piercing the exterior curtain walls with more windows and moving the outdoor kitchens out to the outer bailey. Then in 1652, the Donjon Tower was partly destroyed by Cardinal Mazarin during a time known as the Fronde. This was a period of open rebellion in France, and some of the nobles were ultimately trying to gather power to themselves and, resisting royal authority. And so the concern was that the rebels might gain access to the castle and use that as a defensive position to fight the royal army. And finally, the main donjon tower that had been partly destroyed in 1652 was almost completely obliterated by the retreating German army who had held the castle as a defensive position during World War I. They also had a large gun positioned in the forest about a mile or so north of Coucy. And in order to keep the Allied forces from using it as a forward base in terms of beating back the German retreat, they decided to blow the main donjon tower with 28 tons of dynamite, and they also placed 10 tons of dynamite in each of the four corner towers of the inner bailey. And that left very little standing aside from some of the walls, mainly the curtain wall on the northwest face. Okay, so finally we just want to take a run through the PDF itself to look at some of the major sections. Cover inside, we have a 3/4 perspective view of the castle. It gives you a good view of what it looked like with people walking around inside of it, and title page. But let's take a look at it. So the first section, chapter 1, this article written by Richard F. Bach was written in 1917, and this is shortly after the castle, or the walls of the inner bailey towers were blown up by the German army. This is a 1880s account by F.R. McClintock, who was sort of an adventurer who had been a lieutenant in the army, and then he was part of a team that explored the Arctic and did some other things, and he did some travel writing. And then lastly, we have this article by George T. Clark. This is part of a larger 2-volume book series that he did on castles of mainly England, but he looked at some of the other major castles of France and some other areas. And then in the second section we have our restoration articles by Viollet-le-Duc. He did this restoration of Coucy Castle in around 1875, and the reason this is useful is because we've started converting the maps then to something that you might be able to use in an adventure, whether that's something you prepared or you just need a castle location. What you find is that the maps are scaled on a grid system here, so you can use them accurately in terms of space, and that the text of these articles then describes what is labeled on those maps. We also have the same kind of article with notations about all the various locations for the Long Gate, which is the main gate to the town. And you'll see all the defensive positions and the gatehouse and everything are fully keyed and labeled, and that the text of the article then tells you what's going on with each of those labels. And then finally, just some random notes, a little bit about the towers, a little bit about the wooden hoardings, the top of the towers where archers would conceal themselves so that they could fire down on attacking troops. And then lastly, a little bit about the latrines, because who doesn't need to know what's going on in the garderobe? And then just a final section is something that I've written up as far as other things that aren't mentioned necessarily explicitly in the main articles. Ideas that you might want to employ if you were running a little adventure using this as part of your setting. You might want to know a little bit about inns, about the local abbeys outside of town, that sort of thing. So I've added that in, and that would be it.